Hello and welcome to the Indiana University Southeast School of Education podcast and YouTube channel. My name's Troy Hubbard and I will be the moderator. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kelly Bernado, coordinator of the ENL-ESL program, and our focus for this episode is on the Migrant simulation recently held at Indiana University Southeast.
Good evening and thank you, Troy. I am so excited to share a little bit more about the migration simulation that took place in fall of 2022 on the IU Southeast campus. This was an experience that I had many, many years ago when I was the EL director in Greater Clark County Schools, when it was held on the waterfront in downtown Louisville. And I knew when I started at IU Southeast that this was something that I really wanted to bring to our campus for our students to experience. So here in this episode, we have a variety of students participating in this conversation, and I'm going to let them briefly introduce themselves, and then we're going to go through a few questions, just kind of authentically talking through what this experience meant for you and how it could impact your future.
Dr. Bernado, if I can interrupt real fast, would you mind explaining what ENL-ESL is to some of our students or some of our viewers who may not know?
Absolutely. So when I talk about ENL, our program at IU Southeast is actually called English as a New Language, or ENL. This is an acronym in education. We have lots of acronyms. So in education, ENL, it can also be interchangeable with ESL, meaning English as a second language, ELL, English language learners. The most current here in 2023 term is MLL, or multilingual learners. So when we're talking about this field, we're talking about students a lot of times who are immigrants and refugees themselves, or their family members were immigrants or refugees. And so they've now come to our country and they are in our schools, a lot of times speaking multiple languages.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. And also, it's not just Spanish; it's any language. It's Japanese, Chu, which is a derivative of Spanish. So there's all kinds of languages. It doesn't teach you a foreign language. It teaches you how to teach students who don't speak English as their native language.
That's exactly right, and that's a really common misconception with our program at IU Southeast. So we are part of the School of Education, and we have an undergraduate program and a graduate program, which teaches either future teachers or current teachers how to better serve this immigrant, refugee, this EL population in school settings. So thank you for clarifying that.
All right, let's jump right in and we'll talk a little bit. Dr. Bernado, if you want to, go ahead and let's introduce everybody and let's tell them exactly what their roles were in the simulation.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to go in the order of my screens and we will start with Ms. Emma. If you want to introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and your role in the simulation.
My name's Emma, and I am an elementary education major at IU Southeast, and my concentration is in ENL and ESL. And in the simulation, I was one of the people who was immigrating into the country, or at least attempting to.
All right. And Charles.
What's up? My name is Charles Carter, and I'm a secondary education majors, concentration in social studies, and I was coming from Cuba.
All right. And that will lend us to Argelia.
Hello, my name is Argelia Rodriguez. I'm from Cuba, and my role in the I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. We can edit it.
My role was in the language. And I'm right now a second grade teacher in Immersion School of Hawthorne Elementary, and I teach second grade math, Spanish, and science in Spanish.
And Argelia is also one of our graduate students at IU Southeast getting her ENL-ESL license. And then last but not least, Ms. Kara.
Hello, my name is Kara Wright, and I am a sophomore at IUS, and I actually covered the simulation as part of working for Dr. Fry at the Office of Community Engagement and Service Learning.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for introducing yourselves. Let's get in the meat and potatoes of our episode. And Kelly, exactly what is it? What happened? I mean, this is a simulation that takes place all over the country, if I'm not mistaken, but it kind of gives participants a glimpse into what it's really like to be an immigrant into the United States at this time.
Mhm. So, this simulation, just to kind of give a brief overview for our listeners, students, as Emma and Charles will represent through this conversation, they started with very little knowledge about what was going to be happening, in this simulation. So we gathered in a large classroom, and there was some general background information that was given about the immigrant and refugee population in our area in the United States. They learned a little bit about some of the different groups that they would be representing in family units throughout the simulation. And then they were launched into the simulation that took place in a number of spaces across our campus. So when Charles introduced himself, he said that he represented Cuba. So that his family unit actually was taking on the role of a Cuban family group within the simulation. So he had to go through different obstacles and different tasks and things, which I'm going to let the students share a little bit more about. But the idea was to then allow students to have this experience to then reflect upon how it could, relate to either their current classroom settings or future classroom settings.
Okay. And Emma, you want to talk about your role real fast?
Sure. So in my group, we were immigrating from Poland, I want to say. It's been a minute, so I'm not completely sure, but I think that's where we were coming from. And so we all divided into our roles, and we made sure that we knew a bit of our backstory, because we were going to be asked that when we came upon Border Patrol. They asked us our backstory, so we wanted to make sure we memorized that before we took off and launched into the experience. And so then we got to the room, and there were a bunch of different stations in there. Like there was one that was health checks, and then food rations, and we went around to all of those different areas and just tried to get our checked off so that we could eventually get asylum in the country.
Now, when you say get things checked off, what were some of the things a migrant faces as they come in? Of course, there's monetary concerns. I mean, just for example, what else, Emma?
We had to do schooling, so we had to learn like a language, and that was what Arhelia, she was in that role, and so she was teaching us a new language, and we had to be able to say the phrases. And then we also had the health checks, and they would screen us for health, and then they would give us a check if we had a good health, or they would give us a card that said that we had a disease or something, and then we had to go to quarantine and things like that.
Fantastic. Okay. And now, Arhelia, forgive me if I'm not saying that exactly right. What, as your role in the simulation, you were, just explain your role and what exactly your experiences were.
My role was in the language station. So we were receiving the families and we were teaching the new language. So in my station, we were two that speak Spanish, and we were another friend that speak a different language from Indian. So they came where we were, and we explained in Spanish where they need to do, where they need to go. And then we teach them a couple of words that they need to know when they get in the new school environment. So that was basically what we were doing. So all the time we speak Spanish, and they need to figure out what we were saying.
Oh, fantastic. All right. Charles, what was your experiences?
Okay, so again, I was coming from Cuba, and they had several stations, like Emma was saying. But then I really want to touch on how, like, as a group, we all like felt really lost and felt like we couldn't trust anybody really. So it's just like that was the most nerve-wracking part, like the trust, going to these different stations and seeing if you're in the right spot. Or that was what most touched me during the simulation for sure. And I could definitely.
And I think, Charles, you hit the nail on the head, because
Yeah.
that's the impetus. What we want people, I think, to bring back from that simulation is, my gosh, this is terrifying.
Yeah,
this is
it definitely
hard.
was. Right.
This is very difficult. And, where do I turn? Who do I go to?
Exactly.
And without this turning into a political discussion, it's very difficult and frightening to go through this process. So yeah, thank you very much.
If I can just add, so on my side of organizing the simulation, and really working with the volunteers for the training and setting the stage and creating the space, those of you that know me know that I am very organized. I'm very detail oriented. And I had a really hard time because it was literally programmed to create chaos. Right. So we were told to create this confusion, which for me, because of my nature, was really hard. But I would love if Kara can jump in, because from her perspective, covering this from the Office of Community Engagement, you know, some of the things, Kara, that you wrote about in your article and kind of gleaned from that outside perspective, I think also speak to this point.
Yes, I was really blessed that because I wasn't coming into this as an education student, I didn't have to go to every single station in the order that one was necessarily supposed to. And because of that, I really got to see a consistent theme across all of the stations of frustration, not understanding where you were supposed to go, what was supposed to happen. And as you were speaking to, it wasn't for a lack of cohesion with the simulation. It was actually the exact opposite. It was just that realistic. And these people, these refugees, this is what they actually go through. And I saw that consistently time and time again. And specifically looking at the debrief section where the students are supposed to share their experience, I was surprised how many walked away genuinely frustrated. They were quite upset that they had gone through this simulation. And though I hope that they could appreciate it with a little bit more time to reflect, those feelings were very raw and they were brought out very distinctly.
Very well put. Yeah. And Kara, one thing, did you notice, along with the frustration, did you see any tears? I know my role in it was kind of like a border agent, kind of jailer. And I felt really bad because the participants didn't get a break. You know, I mean, what I mean is like, oh, sorry, you got to go over here. Sorry, you know.
I think that what I saw the most, not necessarily tears, but was just this intense confusion and somewhat a bit of fear as well, especially when they had to go to the health checks that Emma was talking about. I witnessed one girl who was supposed to be playing the role of a 12-year-old. And of course, these were based off of real refugee stories. And she just had this fear and panic because she was told that she was actually pregnant. And now they had to figure out how to handle this as they went about the rest of the simulation.
And as you stated, these were all real life circumstances that they brought to the simulation. Dr. Bernardo, real fast, would you mind telling us who runs the simulation? I mean, is that the company that does this, or for any of our listeners or schools that may be viewing this, how do they get in touch with this to do the simulation?
Absolutely. So this simulation was designed many years ago by a local educator, compassion educator, I think is what he calls himself, Judd Hendricks, formerly of the Global Human Project, but he currently runs the Interfaith Paths for Peace in Louisville, Kentucky. And that is a piece of that organization. And he's continuing to work to put on these simulations across the country. I know in the spring of 2023, he's working with Jefferson County Public Schools and the Louisville Metro government to do some events, more public events in the Louisville area where it will maybe be open more to the community, you know, moving forward. So that's really exciting.
Dr. Bernardo, do you see us at Indiana University Southeast doing the simulation again in a year or two?
I would love that. There's a lot of interest, on opening up this opportunity past the School of Education, because of my personal field and personal passion. You know, I had some internal motivations to start with the School of Education. But there is a lot of interest across the campus and even into our community. We had a lot of community volunteers, could not have put on the simulation without the community volunteers to really play those roles. And so it really stirred up a lot of really great conversation around what an opportunity or event like this could mean for our community as well. So coming soon in the near distant future, hopefully we'll be able to do something like this again.
And we'll have contact information in the description down below of the podcast and of the YouTube show, the YouTube episode. Now, I want to ask if any of you had gone through in your life experiences, anything similar to this.
Yes.
Would you mind
And,
explaining a little?
Yes, I'm from Cuba, so it's similar because I think that some immigrants from other countries came here, under difficult situations than me, different and I can say worse situations than me, because Cuba have I can say Cuba and the United States have like
An agreement of some sort, or
the agreement,
pathway.
sorry, the agreement, yeah, and that was kind of easy, but the language barrier was super difficult for me when I get here. I don't speak any English, and was hard because in some places they don't want to help me. So I remember when I get to some stores to buy different things, and they say, I don't understand you, I'm sorry, or coming back, or come back with somebody that can help you. So that was super hard for me. So yes, that was, and I know that another immigrants like Mexican people and how we see over there in the simulations, they have a really, really hard time when they came here.
I faced a little bit of the same thing when we adopted our daughter from Russia, and we had to make 3 trips. I don't know Russian, and you're kind of at their mercy. We fly in, and it's like, okay, you can easily be taken advantage of. And there are predators and sharks that are out there ready to take, and assimilation includes this. They're ready to take advantage of someone's, situation, for sure. Anyone else have anything similar they'd like to share? Okay.
So Troy, if I can jump in just really quickly, because I think this is a really great segue, just to add a little piece, that Argelia is a lovely and unique situation when we're talking about students at IU Southeast. And she is an amazing educator in Louisville that has come back to add her ESL license. But the typical, and I shouldn't say typical, but many of our students at IU Southeast and in the School of Education specifically may not have experiences like this, right? And I think we just saw that when you were asking the other participants if they had that connection. And that really speaks to, for me, the motivation behind creating this experience, because as these educators and Kara, wherever you end up, after you graduate, no matter what field you're in, you're going to be working with and teaching and serving this community. And I think it's really important, specifically for educators, to have that experience, just to kind of maybe think through the mindset and has it shifted. And that really goes to this next point. I'm curious if this experience impacted you as a future educator or as an educator. And Kara, I know that you're not in that education field, so I'll just say, for future pieces, as far as the rest of your college career and moving forward, did this experience impact that part of you as a person?
Yes. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead.
Just that right now I understand more other cultures, and that would be that help me as educator to have more empathy with my students when they struggle with different things in the school, during the school time.
Yes, I agree. I think empathy is the big word, a little bit of understanding and empathy. Charles, anything to add?
Yeah, empathy, a big one for sure. And just having more patience when it comes to students, and just realizing that, like you said, like, students learn differently. They might, gain knowledge easier, harder, whatever you want to call it, but just having more patience with these students.
Mm-hmm. And I'd just like to to piggyback on what Charles said, not just with students, but with everyone, adults you interact with wherever who may not understand the language or come from a different culture. They may understand the language, but come from a different culture. I think the whole process helps us to be more empathetic and to understand each other, and really brings us together. I mean, I think. Emma?
I remember walking out of the simulation and looking at one of my friends, and I was just like, that was so eye-opening. That was just my word, because I genuinely had no idea that's what the process was like. That was totally new to me. So I thought that it will just make me a better teacher, because I'll be able to put myself in the shoes of my students and really think like back to this experience and remember what that was like. And I know it was just a little glimpse, but a little bit in their shoes is better than nothing. So I feel like it's going to make me more empathetic for sure.
Dr. Bernardo, we don't have a lot of time left. In closing, a few things you want to go over and want to be sure and share with our viewers and listeners?
Real quick, I wanted to give Kara a word because she had something a few minutes ago. So I wanted to make sure to get that in before we jumped into that, if that's okay.
Oh, well, thank you. I was just going to say, I actually didn't realize specifically for us who live near Louisville, what a large refuge. For me, that was something that I was really opening my eyes to, was just how many opportunities we have to touch this community as well. Your interactions, no matter what field you go into, are going to be impacted, but also specifically where we're located.
Absolutely. And Kara, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because as a result, as an almost immediate result of this simulation, we heard from Charles, we heard from Emma, we heard from Argelia in that education field, but I had a few students that almost immediately after completing the simulation emailed me, came to me and said, hey, I want to add ENL, ESL as a minor or as a concentration. So it was that immediate switch as far as this is important to me. I see this now. But then also I had a number of follow-up emails from other professors and from students, where students really wanted to do more. They're saying, okay, now we understand this experience. So what opportunities are there in the community so that we can then continue to work with people who are immigrants and refugees in our community to help them to maybe, have some more positive experiences along the way. So I was really excited to work again with our community partners and our community volunteers and create a list of volunteer opportunities and tutoring opportunities and different local organizations that, and that was all student driven, which was really exciting to really kind of feel that not only did this opportunity have the impact, but now our amazing students want to take it a step further on their own time and of their own will and make a difference in the community. So it was really a really awesome experience for me. I'm excited to hear about the impact, that it had here for this small sample, right, of participants. But a really great opportunity for the School of Education and for the campus as a whole and for our community as a whole. And like Troy, you said earlier, really excited moving forward to think through how opportunities like this can just continue to grow, our campus and our school as a whole so that we can better support the community.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Bernardo. In closing, anyone have anything else they would like to add? Well, I want to thank you all for participating in our podcast and our YouTube episode. Very much. Thank you for participating in the migrant simulation. I think that the lessons we learned will continue on, cascade effect, the little ripple that we make. And that's why some of us are in education. Kara, you need to join. No, I'm kidding. That's why we're in education, because those little ripples will create a big wave someday. So, Dr. Bernardo, anything else you'd like to say in closing?
I don't think so. Thank you for listening. And as Troy shared earlier, we will make sure to have that contact information in the comments. And, if you have any interest in better serving the immigrant and refugee population, we here at IU Southeast are ready to help along the way. So let us know what we can do to help you, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much. And be sure to hit that subscribe button, and we will see you on the next episode.